Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're gonna be doing a product review of something that we used for the first time last season, and that's the Hodag licking stick. And the licking stick is essentially something that you're using to try to get the deer within bow range. And right off the bat, I do wanna say I'm not sponsored by Hodag, so this is not gonna be a bias review. I just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on this product after using it last year, because I think it could potentially help some of you guys get more deer within bow range. So we're gonna go over a couple things in this video. First off, we're gonna talk about what is the Hodag licking stick. Second, we'll kind of talk about how to set this thing up. And finally, I'll kind of give you my review on the Hodag licking stick. So right off the bat, what is the Hodag licking stick? If you guys are familiar with a scrape tree within a food plot, it's essentially the same thing. It's just a smaller scrape tree. So what a scrape tree is you're basically either planting or cutting down a tree and then you're burying it in your food plot somewhere within bow range of your stand. And why you're doing this is because deer will use that tree as a way to communicate with one another, much like they do with mock scrapes. The only difference with the scrape tree is you're putting this out in the middle of your food plot as opposed to on the edges like you do with your mock scrapes. But again, the concept is the same. The deer are conditioned to go straight to that tree and deposit their scent and check the scent of other deer. So the doe families are going to use that to communicate with one another. The bucks are going to use that to communicate with other bucks in the area, who's dominant, who's not. They're also going to be using it to check for estrus does. So all the deer in the neighborhood are going to be checking the scrape tree, just like all the deer in the neighborhood should be checking your mock scrapes if set up appropriately. So again, the Hodag licking stick is very similar to a scrape tree. It's just a smaller version of the scrape tree. If you're putting a billboard or like a water cooler out in the middle of your food plot, and the local deer love to check this out to deposit their scent and to communicate with the other deer in the area. Think about the Hodag licking stick like the fire hydrant that your dog always has to pee on when you take him for a walk. What he's doing is he's leaving his scent, his sign for those other dogs to find. And when it comes to setting up the Hodag licking stick, it's really simple. There's not a whole lot to it. It's essentially a spring welded to a base plate, and the base plate has holes in it so you can stake it down to ensure that it's not going anywhere. And the first thing that you want to do is find a tree species that the deer in your area love to scrape under. Now, not all tree species are created equal. They do prefer some species over others. And in this area, they really like to scrape under white oaks, beech trees, and grapevines. Now, this is not a mock scrape, so we're not going to cut a grapevine down for this. We're going to either use a beech tree or a white oak. Now, most of the beech trees on this property are a little bit too big for the Hodag licking stick, but we do have a couple white oaks that are growing next to my pool that I don't really want them there anyways because they're going to shade it out and I don't want all those leaves in my pool. So that's what I used last year. I cut down a small white oak because I know that deer in this area really love to use white oaks as their licking branches to communicate with one another. And this year what I did is I only cut down a branch off of one of our white oaks. I didn't cut down a new tree, I just cut off one of the branches from one of the trees by our pole barn. So we'll find out this year if the full tree is better or if just the branch is better, but it should work the same. So once you found your preferred tree species, you want to make sure you're cutting it at least 6 feet long. And this is just to ensure that you have the option of cutting it shorter later down in the process of setting it up. So you have your preferred tree, you cut it, now you need to install it in your food plot. And again, the whole point of you doing this is to bring more deer within bow range, so make sure that you have a clear shot and the Hodag licking stick is set up upwind of your deer stand. Next, you need to stake the base plate down and fit the tree into the spring. So if the base of the tree is too wide, you are going to have to trim it back until your tree fits into the spring. Once you have the tree in the spring, there are tightening screws on each side, so you want to tighten those up to make sure that that tree is not coming out of the spring. And the final step in the process is to balance the Hodag licking stick. Right off the bat, you're probably not going to have it balanced. You're going to have that tree in the spring and it's going to tip one way or the other. So what you want to do is you want to trim back the branches on the side that it's tipping towards. So if it's tipping to the right, you want to trim back the right side, removing some weight so it springs back to the middle. And you just want to keep trimming the tree back until you have the Hodag licking stick balanced so it's staying, for the most part, vertical. So that's how you set it up. It's not complicated at all, very simple. And now we'll kind of get into my review on the Hodag licking stick and kind of my thoughts on maybe some pros and some cons. I do want to apologize. I did not put one of our video cameras on the Hodag licking stick. We don't have a ton of trail cameras that have good quality HD video. Those cameras were placed in locations where I knew I had a higher probability of getting some older bucks moving during daylight. So last year I set up the Hodag licking stick in one of our food plots around Labor Day, early September. And we were getting pictures of deer right away. They were very curious. They would check it out, I would say, on a daily basis, and they would check it out during daylight. Our daytime pictures were primarily doe families and young bucks, and maybe around 10 minutes after legal shooting light, that's when those older bucks would actually come check it out. So they were there very close to legal shooting hours, but they just don't feel comfortable stepping out into these big open spaces during daylight. This was placed in a food plot that's just under an acre in size, so a lot of times those older deer in the area don't really feel comfortable moving through that food plot during daylight. They're kind of hanging back more in the timber, and then they're coming out just as it gets dark. So that, I would say that's definitely one of the pros, is it did work exactly how I expected it to. When we put it in, most of the deer that would come through our food plot would come check it out, would deposit scent, and then they would move on. And I think every year it's going to get better. As long as I'm keeping this in the same spot, that's going to be conditioned in the deer's memory to always go and check the Hodag licking stick. Another thing that's really nice about this licking stick is the fact that it's on a spring. So we had a couple times where some of those older deer would kind of take out some of their aggression on the licking stick, and they would bend it over all the way, and it would spring right back up. They'd bend it over, it'd spring right back up. So it can take a lot of abuse, and it's not going anywhere. They might shred the leaves off it, they might break the branches off it, but there's a pretty low probability that they're gonna be able to get that tree out of that spring and pull the stakes out of the ground. Because it has so much give, the chances that they're gonna do that is very low. Now compare that with a scrape tree. I've seen it before where these older deer are rubbing it so hard, they're so aggressive with these scrape trees. Maybe there's a rival buck in the food plot and they're trying to intimidate them, and they're so aggressive on these scrape trees that they're popping them out of the ground, and now your scrape tree is done. This Hodag licking stick, I think, can take a lot more abuse than the scrape tree. Another thing that I really like about this Hodag licking stick is a great way to inventory your deer herd. Very similar to how you would do it with a mock scrape back in the cover, except this time you're doing it in your food plot. So those are the things that I really like about the Hodag licking stick. It really does spark curiosity in the deer. It's a great way for them to communicate with one another. It's a great way to inventory your herd, and it does bring those deer within bow range. Now there is one thing that I think that the scrape tree has an advantage on over the Hodag licking stick, and that's just the fact that you don't really have to balance your scrape tree. Why that's important is because if you're burying a scrape tree, let's say you cut down a white oak for your scrape tree and you bury it 20 yards from your stand, you can actually have a branch of that white oak pointing back at your stand. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring the deer to that side of the scrape tree, and a lot of times what will happen is those deer will work that scrape broadside to you, giving you a great shot opportunity. And because you don't have to balance the scrape tree, you can have only one branch pointing out to the side, and then that's the branch that those deer are going to use. And you can't really do that with the Hodag licking stick. Because you have to balance it on that spring, you can't really have one branch pointing toward your stand unless you have another branch pointing in the completely opposite direction. So that is one area where the scrape tree has an advantage over the Hodag licking stick. But overall, I would say this is a pretty good product, especially for those of you guys that just want one more reason for those deer to be within bow range. So I think that covers it for the review and our thoughts on the Hodag licking stick. Again, we're not sponsored by them. We did not get the product for free. We don't really use a whole lot of products, but when I saw this one and I knew the concept behind it, I really wanted to give it a try. If you guys are interested in checking it out, they do sell it on Amazon, so I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. If you guys have any questions on the Hodag licking stick or questions on anything in general, please drop those questions in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.